Good morning. I'm Janet Poley, President and CEO of the American Distance Education Consortium, ADEC, and I'll be your moderator today for this wonderful research symposium that's coming to you from the Sloan Consortium. We have a lot of exciting and stimulating information that we want to share with you, and we hope that you'll participate with us through questions, comments during the program, which we can take by phone, by chat, by Twitter, by Facebook, through the social media. And also, there'll be an opportunity for you to continue discussions you've been doing in the Commons, as well as follow up after the program. Let me give you just a little bit of information about expectations as far as timeline. This morning, we now hope all of you, regardless of where you are in the country, whatever your time, on the East Coast, we know it's 11 o'clock, and we're going to go for an hour and a half with some excellent presentations and a couple of opportunities for questions. We'll take a half-hour break at 12:30 Eastern, and you'll have to do your backward calculations to know what time that's going to be. But we'll be gone for about half an hour, and we'll come back and have more presentations and discussion from 1 to 2 Eastern. We're so happy that you could participate with us today. This is a really important issue, scaling online education, and it's one that I think is new to many of us, and we're going to learn a great deal about it. To kick this off, I want to start with Dr. Don Spicer. Don is Associate Vice Chancellor of the University of Maryland System, and Don is also the CIO, so he's very busy, and we're extremely excited that he could kick this off. He's also co-chair with Karen Swan, who you're going to meet in a little bit, of the Research Committee for the Sloan Consortium. So Don, if you're standing by, I would hope that you can kick this off and tell us why this issue of scale is so important, and how did this come about, and what can we expect?
Well, thank you, Jan, and welcome to the participants and to all of my colleagues in this effort. We started talking about the need for a research symposium about 2 years ago. In online education, practice and research are closely aligned, and we hoped that we were able to encourage and support both. The Sloan Consortium, as the National Professional Society for Online Education, has done a number of efforts to support both practice and research. There are a wide variety of online workshops on how to deal with online education, from pedagogy to policy. There are a variety of conferences, and there have been research studies that the Sloan Consortium has undertaken. And we have the Journal of Asynchronous Learning Networks for research publications. We felt that there was the need for an opportunity for researchers to come together on various research topics to both support the JALN publication and, in fact, to enhance research in online education broadly. Originally, we thought that perhaps the best way to do it would be a traditional face-to-face conference, but then we realized that the media was part of the message, and so we initiated this year 4 research symposia online, and we've used a variety of delivery formats, as is appropriate for online education. And we have started dealing with the topics that are the pillars of online education. The first symposium in January was on quality. The next one was on STEM. This is the third of the series on scaling. And the fourth will be offered in November on policy. I will talk more about the policy symposium later, but I'm going to turn it back to Jan, and thank you very much.
I think I'm going to go to our guests who are here at the University of Nebraska, and we'll get started with Karen. And we'll come back, and we know that what you have to tell us is going to be timeless throughout the program anyway. So we're glad to know that you're where you're supposed to be. So we'll let the technology go to work. I would like to introduce two people with me here in the studio, Dr. Karen Swan. Karen is the co-chair of the Research Committee for the Sloan Consortium, as I said earlier. And Karen, you've had a great number of accomplishments in this area. We know research is very close to your heart.
It is.
But she is the James J. Stuckel Professor at the University of Illinois-Springfield, and also has the co-chair with Don Spicer for the Research Committee. She's also a member of the Board of Directors. She's had time, or not had time, to write 2 books and 100 research articles and 200 presentations, and is very, very active in the research community as well as the practice community. Karen, I know you have some really important things to tell us, so we get off on the right note. This is about research today, although research and practice are connected. So I'm going to ask you to go to another location here where you'll be presenting your topic, and I would like to ask you to do that now, and I'm going to turn to Carolyn Jarmon. And Carolyn Jarmon is another very well-known person in the online learning world, and she is Vice President of the National Center for Academic Transformation, and that's a big job. She works closely with Carol Twigg, whom some of you know, and Carolyn has been an EDUCOM Fellow, has been a faculty member, has been published widely, and certainly has had a significant role in course redesign with a lot of emphasis on scale. And so, Carolyn, I'm going to come back to you after we hear from Karen Swan and ask for you to also help get us started on the right foot with these research studies and what we do and don't know about scale.
Thank you.
So with no further ado, I'd like to go to Dr. Karen Swan. And Karen is going to start us off with a study that I think is very significant with our respect to thinking about the component parts of scale. Karen?
Well, Jan, in 2010, McKinsey & Company produced a report called Winning by Degrees. Winning by Degrees has been important in the national conversation on access in particular, but which I think has relevancy to scale as well. Remember, the Obama administration set a goal of a 40% increase in degrees awarded at the post-secondary level, and this translates to 1 million more degrees per year. The Gates Foundation asked McKinsey to explore whether or not this was at all possible, and if so, how it could be done. And the McKinsey folks started with the idea that it being unlikely that states would invest any more money in education, this would have to be achieved through getting more students graduated for the same costs. So McKinsey developed a metric, degree productivity, or the cost per graduate at the full-time student equivalency level, and estimated that the U.S. collectively needs to increase degree productivity by 23% to meet the Obama administration's goals without increasing system costs. They also found that institutions in the top degree productivity quartiles had 17 to 38% higher degree productivity than comparable institutions in the same groups. So they argued that achieving 23% degree productivity should be doable. They then reviewed the literature on scale and visited 8 exceptional institutions, the ones that were at the top of the top in their quartiles, to identify drivers of degree productivity. One of these institutions was Rio Salado College, which is represented here today by Ed Kelty, whom we will be hearing from in the second half of this program. Through these methods, McKinsey identified 2 kinds of drivers of degree productivity: completion efficiencies and cost efficiencies. I think these 3 concepts, the degree productivity metric, completion efficiencies, and cost efficiencies, might be a good framework for investigating scale. As we all know, degree completion rates are very bad in this country. Only 51.8% of students at 4-year institutions graduate in 6 years, and only 11.4% of students at two-year institutions graduate in 3. So completion efficiency is a very important part of scale, and systematically enabling all students to complete their degrees is the first degree productivity driver identified by McKinsey. Some initiatives that are working in this regard include creating structured degree pathways that reduce the number of electives and move cohorts of students who support each other through to degree. Although not mentioned in winning by degrees, many institutions are now using learning analytics to identify students at risk for dropping or stopping out, often in real time, and intervening to keep them on a path to graduate. Another thing McKinsey found was that over 20% of completers' degrees do not contribute to the degree they get, plus another 7% of these credits have an F or a W, a fail or a withdraw outcome. So reducing non-productive credits for all students is another important driver of degree completion. Institutions that develop completion and progression policies have managed to bring these numbers down. In addition, there have been several recent reports which have found that developmental education classes are both non-productive credits and a good indicator of non-completion. So DevEd courses really need to be rethought and redesigned. Similarly, students who transfer from one institution to another often lose a number of credits in the transfer because many institutions make students take a certain number of credits from them. Thus, liberal transfer and competency-based credit procedures can also help move students to degrees. The other side of the degree productivity coin is cost efficiency. Across U.S. institutions, the average cost for instruction is about $7,000 per FTSE, full-time student equivalency. This can be dramatically reduced through alternatives to individually designed courses, something I think that Carolyn will talk about more. But essentially this idea is that it's not at all cost-effective to have full-time faculty handcrafting and teaching 10, 20, 30, 50 versions of English 101, so that institutions have been experimenting with centrally designed courses. And these courses can be taught by adjunct faculty, as is done at Rio Salado, and even automated, which can be supervised by individual mentors, as is done at Western Governors. Something along these lines that will need to be considered in the very near future are MOOCs, or massively open online courses, and how they fit into the degree completion process. MOOCs are obviously reaching a huge number of students at one time, and even though only a small percentage of these students actually finish the courses, because they're free, they're very productive. Credit for MOOCs, however, is still up in the air, but I'm sure this is going to be addressed really soon. Another cost of college degrees involves core services, which McKinsey identifies as institutional supports such as human resources, information technologies, finance, and central administration, student services such as financial aid, counseling, and enrollment, academic support services such as libraries and audiovisual services, and plant operations. The average cost of core services across U.S. institutions is $9,000 per FTSE. These costs can be reduced through some of the usual administrative efficiencies, including technology solutions such as the use of electronic forms and processing and student self-service options, achieving greater staff productivity through such things as centralization and training frontline staff to fill multiple roles, and of course, outsourcing. Finally, another source of costs are non-core services, which, according to McKinsey, include, believe it or not, research and public service, and for on-ground institutions, athletics and housing. These costs vary among categories of institutions, with Research 1 institutions having the highest non-core costs. For institutions, especially online institutions, however, degree productivity can be increased by carefully considering what their mission is and eliminating programs that don't advance it. For example, the Tennessee Technology Center thought about their mission and realized that awarding degrees wasn't a part of it, and now it just awards certificates, which brings down the costs immensely. Another way to do this is to eliminate altogether non-core services, which is something that DeVry and Western Governors University are trying. So I think, to conclude, that degree productivity could be a good metric for measuring scale, and these 5 drivers of degree productivity, structured degree pathways, reduction of non-productive credits, redesigned instruction, improved efficiency in core services, and reduction of non-core services, are reasonable places to begin a conversation about scale and could drive a research agenda on scale, as they can easily support the development of research questions and initiatives. Indeed, many of our presenters today will touch on approaches that fit into this taxonomy. On the other hand, such a taxonomy raises issues and questions. For example, the report describes what has worked, not what could work. MOOCs and learning analytics, for example, were not a serious issue in 2010, but they are now. The report doesn't explore the sharing of resources across institutions, something that was very important in getting the Cini Learning Network off the ground, but could be tried on a larger scale now. In that vein, I wonder whether research on scale itself can be scaled. That is, can we pool our resources to investigate scale on a multi-institutional level? For example, the Predictive Analytics Reporting Project, PAR, is investigating the efficacy of interventions grounded in learning analytics across 16 institutions. I also think that the notion of degree productivity raises questions of value. For example, degree productivity may capture degree production, but it doesn't differentiate among degrees or courses. What about the national importance of what Jefferson called an informed citizenry, who are capable of critical thinking and decision-making? This kind of gets lost in the structured pathways and reducing non-productive credits. Shouldn't colleges and universities have a public service mission? And who will produce knowledge if colleges and universities don't? Finally, there's the question of instrumental reason. Joseph Weizenbaum thought that some societal tasks, he identified psychology and judging, needed to be done by humans and not by computers. I think education is one of these tasks as well. It probably can be automated, but should it? Similarly, degree productivity might be a good way to think about scale, but a bad way to think about education.
And we're going to go now to a really important person in the life of all of this, and that's Dr. Frank Mayadas. Frank is the founding president of the Sloan Consortium Board of Directors. Frank also was a senior advisor to the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation beginning in 2010. And prior to that, many of us got to know him as he was program director at the foundation and bringing all of this online learning, grant making into play. It's really what caused the consortium to form, caused all kinds of experimentation around the country. He was a busy man in running all of those grants, but also worked with the globalization agenda at the foundation, careers in technology areas, and a couple of other things, I think, as well. Frank is a person who has cared a lot about scale for a long time. And we've all heard his mantra about what's important in online learning, and scale has always been one of the key words that he uses. He's coming to us this morning from Pace University, and we're going to ask him to kick things off and tell us from his perspective, what do we mean by scale, and why is this important anyway?
That's great. Do we have the first slide up?
We do, Frank. Go ahead.
Okay. So what I wanted to do is to just use that slide to make one point, and that is we have come a long way since we started in the online education journey. And we've had ideas, we've had concepts, we've been able to prove feasibility, and we've brought the field forward, and today millions are benefiting from your efforts. And we should continue with ideas and concepts and demonstrating feasibility, but now is the time to begin to pull them together into large scale. For the simple reason that scale matters. Small things are good, they're creative, they can be inventive, they can be interesting, but on balance, they will not transform society. You need large scale to do that. And that's exactly why the subject of scale is now timely. We've done the good background work. We're not there. We need to start thinking about the goal, and the goal has to be scale. Could I see the next slide? There are many good things that one can set as goals from a scale initiative, and I've listed two of them here. We set out on the online learning journey, many of us at least, with the idea of providing access, better access, higher degree of access to learners all across the world. We can greatly enhance that if we pay serious attention to scale. So access, which we are succeeding with, can be greatly amplified by scale. But there are other benefits, and another one I've mentioned here is cost effectiveness. That is, large scale will improve the cost effectiveness of education and make it a much more accessible and usable service by many, many people. So both these things, access and cost effectiveness, we expect to come out of a scale initiative. And there'll be others, but these are the two that we'll keep in the forefront for today's session. And finally, let me just see the final slide. I want to say that when you're faced with a great big mushball-like scale, which is complex, difficult to address, for instance, where do we start? It's sometimes good to break it into smaller pieces and address the pieces. And today you'll see our speakers will pick up on some of these themes, not all of them. They'll all get picked up eventually, but some of them will be picked up today. And I've broken the big problem of scale into these 5 areas. Culture. First of all, we need to change culture. Culture in education is built around classrooms, traditional meeting times, credit hours, seat time, and so forth. These are things that we have to change. And then once we begin to get to international reach, international cultures will have to be meshed into the cultures that we're so familiar with. All of that will have to be addressed if we're ever going to get to scale. So culture is an important one. Technology. We're not going to enumerate all the technological advances that will be needed to handle the large numbers of students, possibly in larger courses, certainly in many courses. Analytics, continuous monitoring and improvement, scheduling systems allowing institutions to better utilize classroom space that's freed up because of online and blended courses, etc. So there are many, many complications that will come about that only technology can solve, and so that's another area we need to pay attention to, scale arena. Direct related issues, course organization and optimization and superior services delivery, terrifically important. Here we have in mind issues like re-engineering and reorganizing courses for gains in quality, cost effectiveness, and overall efficiency, and providing top quality services on large scale such as financial aid, academic advising, and other services. The fourth one is public perception. We will never get to large scale, that is scale commensurate with the scale of higher education in its entirety, until we get the public perception to shift ever so slightly to begin thinking of online as being entirely just another way of learning. We're not there. We're a long ways from being there. You talk to the average person in the street, when you talk to executives, corporate people, when you talk to college presidents, there's always that uncertainty. Is this stuff any good? How good is it? And we've got to get beyond those questions, and we're not there. So public perception, not likely to be something that comes up in today's session, but I ask you to keep it in mind and to work on this whenever you can, whether you're dealing with the media, whether you're dealing with other knowledgeable people, to remember to keep plugging away at the idea of quality and online learning that go hand in hand and are going hand in hand. And finally, I want to mention policy. This will not be covered today either. It's the subject of a follow-on symposium, but it's really a component element of scale. All the good work that's done towards the objectives of large scale can be undone by poorly thought through policy decisions at the institutional, state, and federal levels, which are imposed on the online blended education community. Our recent experiences with the state regs, policy decisions, back and forthing on that is a good example, but it won't be the last. And so these unwelcome intrusions are setbacks. The education provider community needs for better mechanisms to be in place for becoming aware of the thinking of accreditors and regulators before these things burst on the scene all of a sudden. I'm hoping that the APLU Commission and other efforts that have been underway will help us to work with these policy questions, but they are complex and big, and I think they'll be with us. We've got to chip away at them. So I just wanted to ask you to keep these 5 in mind. As you hear the talks today, you'll hear some of these themes picked up. Some will pick up in follow-on talks, in follow-on symposia, and I think they're part of an attempt to decompose the big fuzzball of scale into something more manageable. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the speakers.
Thanks very much, Frank. We'll keep all of that in mind. In fact, I think our next speaker is going to pick up on several of those themes. Frank will be with us throughout the day and will be available to help answer questions and make comments, and we really appreciate your being with us this morning. I'd like to go now to Carolyn Jarmon. I introduced you to Carolyn at the beginning, and Dr. Jarmon, I know you have some comments, and a number of those fit those components Frank was talking about.
Thank you, Jan. Good morning, everyone. Yes, before I get started on some of the principles that we've been using and the kinds of scale issues we've been addressing, I wanted to give you a little bit of a case study. I'd like the picture that you'll be seeing on the slide is a picture of the University of Alabama. And to their credit, the University of Alabama realized that when 40% of the students were passing, it meant that 60% of the students were not passing the math course that they were taking, and this was unacceptable. So institutionally, they decided that they needed to take on this problem. What you're looking at is the math lab that resulted from the redesign of an introductory math class. And they have, in fact, done a couple of things I'd like to share with you. First of all, students learn math by doing math, not watching math. We've known that for a long time, and the students in this lab are doing math rather than watching someone else do math. In addition, we know that freshmen don't do optional, neither, by the way, do sophomores, juniors, or seniors, but the fact is that freshmen need to be told that they are required to do something. In this math lab, they don't drop in or come for tutoring. They're required to show up 3 hours a week where they are doing math. In addition, we know that freshmen don't find math fun in most cases, and in fact, they run into a number of problems. And when they do it in their dorm or in their apartment, they shut the textbook, they don't keep working. The fact is, in this lab, they put a cup on top of the computer and someone comes. So what we have are a lot of students who are doing math, not watching math, in a required environment that has for them immediate assistance. Keep in mind, because in a few minutes I'm going to share with you whether this worked or not at the University of Alabama. For those of you who might not be familiar with the National Center for Academic Transformation, we've been in business since 1999 and were initially a center at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. Today we're an independent, not-for-profit, but our mission has remained unchanged, and it's very important in the context of what Frank and Karen were saying. We work with colleges and universities to do two things. One is to improve the quality of learning of student outcomes by students, and secondly, to reduce instructional costs at the same time. Higher education, as you all well know, faces three major challenges, and they relate to access, the quality of the kind of learning that students are doing, and the number who are mastering the content they need, and thirdly, cost. And we are working with information technology to address all three of these problems. Effective scaling, as Frank has said, will in fact address the quality of the student learning, the sustainability via the lower cost per student of changes that are made, and the results will be more students mastering more content at a lower cost. When we have focused primarily on large enrollment introductory courses, things like math, English, Spanish, psychology, economics, the kinds of courses that students face as freshmen and sophomores. If you're going to spend a lot of time doing a major course redesign, it should have a high impact. Note that these reasons that projects have given to us fall into two categories. Learning outcomes, high drop-fail withdrawal rates are a learning issue. Students are not mastering the content. Waiting lists are a resource issue. Institutions are not capable of providing a number of sections that students need. So redesigns are addressing both the cost and quality issues. We have a definition that I think is important for you, and it has a factor I haven't yet mentioned. Notice that the definition focuses on quality as well as cost reduction, but it is a redesign of the entire course. If there are 15 sections offered at an institution, all 15 are redesigned. If it is a 50-section course, all 50 sections are redesigned. Not a couple of sections, all the sections. That's a scaling issue right there. We've also scaled the way that we work with institutions. We don't do one institution at a time. We've run national and state-based programs so that we, in fact, can deal with a lot of people who want to learn. We've redesigned over the last decade over 120 courses, which touch every year 160,000 students nationally. We have in fact shown improvement in 72% of those, with equivalent learning in 28%, but all of them have reduced cost on average of 37%. We've learned a lot. We know, for example, that there are 6 different models that work. And in fact, these 6 models work because in some disciplines we need to reduce cost and improve quality in one way. In other disciplines we'll use a different way. So we have a variety of models. These are all discussed in great detail on the NCAT website. And in fact, every one of the projects is discussed with a contact name. So if you'd like to know how in fact statistics was redesigned at Ohio State University, Dennis Pearl's email is right there, and you can just click on it and contact Dennis. All of our projects have some characteristics in common that are very important. First of all, as I've already mentioned, we do the whole course. Secondly, students are more actively engaged in learning, both in the content and with other students. All of the redesigned use readily available interactive software, sometimes independently, sometimes in teams, depending on the content of the course. All of them provide more on-demand assistance. Students need help when they have a question, not at 10 o'clock on Monday morning when they finally get back to class. We automate those components that are appropriate. Low stakes quizzing has been extremely effective across all the disciplines. Students don't know what they don't know, and they need help figuring that out. It helps them focus more appropriately on their study, and it helps them understand what are the important components. We automate homework, so it's graded immediately. Students get immediate feedback. The other thing that we've done is move to different kinds of people involved, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples now of the new organizational structures that some institutions are using for their online courses. At Florida Gulf Coast University in Fine Arts, they used to teach a lot of little sections. Well, this was great, except Florida Gulf Coast is an actively, quickly growing institution, and this is a course that's required by every student who goes there. They didn't have enough faculty, they didn't have enough space, so they moved the entire course online. You can see the results at the bottom, but another important structural point is one faculty member now teaches this course with assistance from one course coordinator who handles the technology aspects. And the students are divided into groups of 6, and these groups of 6 are managed by preceptors who are bachelor's qualified people in their field. So what we have are a lot of small groups with people keeping an eye on them. An interesting point is the students think they're in a class of 6. They don't know that there are 950 students taking this course at the same time. So it hasn't changed how the student perceives it, but it's made a big difference for the university. In world literature at Southern Mississippi University, they used to teach small, sort of small, sections of 65. Now all of the students are in one section, and the course is divided into modules. So in the British literature module, the faculty expert teaches all of the students along with some help from graduate assistants. When a new module comes up, a different faculty member who's an expert in that field works with the students. They teach now about 850 students per year, and they've been able to triple course capacity. You can also tell that they do some automated grading using what is now Blackboard or was WebCT, and the TAs and the faculty grade the rest. Computer literacy at Arizona State University was a course that was taught in a very traditional way. Lots of lecturing about computer literacy is not the way that students learn it. It's now offered in either a blended or online model. The lectures are optional. The labs are optional, but many students do come and they get assistance from undergraduate learning assistants. The course has gotten more difficult and more students are succeeding. These are different ways to look at the online environment. But what about that course at the University of Alabama that I mentioned? Remember that they were teaching an introductory course. It was intermediate algebra. They used to teach it in the lecture mode, and we had all those failure problems. Now, success has risen, and consistently between 75% and 80% of the students are passing. This is success for Alabama. The course costs less and more students are succeeding. They also, in that same space that you saw, teach an array of other courses, including college algebra, trig, and business statistics. They have also, by the way, at Alabama, redesigned 15 other arts and sciences courses. And so they have an array of models going on, yielding the same 2 results. The Emporium models used across the United States in a lot of different institutions, from community colleges all the way to a number of research universities. Well, do faculty like the redesigns? These are quotes from real faculty at real institutions. The fact is they love it, but they are admitting that in fact it takes time to design it, and in fact they find it's a lot of work during the transition, but it's worth it. What's next in terms of research? We have about 50 redesigned scholars that have done redesigns in an array of disciplines, and those people are available for you all to use. We would like to scale people's using the institutions using of these principles, and we've got the people to help you. We also intend to do a lot of in-depth analysis of what has worked and what hasn't worked. We found also that some institutions have scaled a department so that it's done in all redesigned principles or a program, and we're going to do a lot more of investigation of how that happens and how well it's working. I'm ready to take any questions, Dan, as I think is Karen.
Okay, that's fabulous. And you saw Carolyn's email there. I've already had a question from several of you asking if the slides will be available after the presentations. And of course they will, and they'll be available through the Sloan C Commons. And you'll have an opportunity not only to use the slides, but we hope to have some multiple use of the presentations themselves in some interesting ways. And we hope a lot of you are going to join us at the conference in Orlando that's coming up in October. And this is kind of a pre-taste with respect to some of the themes you're going to hear there. We're going to hear more about these research symposia, and I know we're going to hear about your ideas. What would you like to see with respect to these symposia going forward? Karen, I'm going to go to you with that question. I know you're putting that panel together along with Don Spicer. Do you have anything you want our folks to know about that and think about before they get to the Orlando conference?
Well, these research symposia are new, as you know, and we're experimenting with ways to do it. So we would really like to have feedback on how and how you would like them to go and what you're interested in. We would also very much like to scale research, as I was saying before, and we think that possibly we could use this opportunity and the Commons to get people working together on projects across institutions. So keep those cards and letters coming. We really want your input, and we really want you to be active, and if you're at the in Orlando, I'll see you there.
That's great. And we know a lot of you will be joining us in Orlando. Those dates coming up, October 10, 11. It's jam-packed. There are workshops the first day and lots of good panels, etc. Now, we're going to go to you for questions and answers. And we hope that some of you have been putting your issues, your questions, comments you might have about things you've heard into the Commons. We also can take phone calls from you, and I hope that there are a few brave souls out there within the Sloan Consortium family and others who might be watching us who can dial in on the telephone, and we'll take your questions that way. We can actually put a question or two on air. We're experimenting with some new technological things as we go along here. I would like to go with the first question that I have to Dr. Jarmon. And Carolyn, a lot of people want to know, can you really apply all these kinds of techniques with course redesign to various discipline areas? Some people say, well, I can see how that could be used this way, but does this really apply across the board? One of the questions we get about online learning in general.
You know, that's a good question, Jan, and actually the answer we can say definitively is it applies across to all disciplines. Initially, when we began, people would say, well, I can imagine this working in the quantitative fields, but what about chemistry? What about biology? What about psychology? What about economics? We now have examples from all of the fields, the humanities, the quantitative areas, the social sciences, and the professional fields like accounting. And so you can go onto our website, and as I said earlier, every one of the projects has a summary and abstract, what they did, how it worked, what outcomes they had, learning as well as cost, and it has a key contact person. If you'd like to know about some of the projects in your field, I would go and contact those people and say, what did you do? How's it working? Have you kept it up? Have you changed it? What would you recommend to me if I were starting now? And they'll tell you, let me tell you, if they have opinions, and they're happy to share them.
Great, good. Well, we hope that that will encourage some of you who may just be thinking about this and getting into it. Actually, I know from people who've been involved with the course redesign grants that this has been a way for a number of people to come together and to think about issues like scale and like the academic culture, and together to come up with some new ideas and test it. You know, that's a lot of what we're talking about here. We need a research base, we need to use our science, and then we need to see how we can put that into practice. Also, I wanted to remind you, as far as questions and answers, if you look at the website where you're getting the stream, if you look there, there is the telephone number. There's also an access code, and be sure to use the access code if you're calling in your question. We actually have an international number too, so we're hoping that maybe a few of you from around the world, in honor of globalization, will also take a look at that. I have a question now for you, Karen, and I think you really provoked some thinking with what you presented from the McKinsey study, but then also at the end, you really raised more questions than you gave answers, and with respect to the information technology, the use of automation, and human beings. Now, I don't expect you to give us all the answers, but from a research standpoint, what do we need to do or be thinking about what's going on now with respect to that area?
That's a hard question.
I know it's a hard question. You asked us. We're turning it back around to you.
Yeah, right. In terms of research, I think probably we need to be looking at all aspects of things. Sometimes the numbers sometimes we just look at the numbers. And we need to also look at, numbers tell us what's happening. They don't tell us why it's happening or how people are perceiving it. So I think we have to look beyond numbers. It's so easy to use them, and especially in online learning where you have incredible amounts of data, that it's important to look beyond. And to not just think about what works, but what might work. And we need to be doing that kind of research.
Can I add something,
Of
Janet?
course,
I think one of the things that we found that some of our institutions have done is studies with their students. They'll do focus groups, because it's also very useful to find out what's not working. Frequently it can be changed. Frequently it can be fixed. Sometimes they find out things that they knew, but it's useful to know that the students are seeing it that way too. One example is students frequently did not come to college to work. This may be a surprise to some faculty, but they came for all kinds of other reasons. Right. And in some of these redesigns, the students are working harder than they were working before. That's actually useful information, and then you can craft ways to explain the changes to students so they understand what in fact is going on and why it's important for them to do the kinds of things that are now being required. So we've learned a lot from what's not working. We've learned a lot from the students. We've learned a lot from the people in other departments, what happens when these students get into their courses. There's really kind of a lot of that information.
Just one, I think that's a really good point. I think what's not working is often covered over in research reports. And what's not working will often tell you a lot more than what is.
Excellent. I think that's really important in terms of what's not working. And we don't need to repeat failures or learn from them or know whether that's one context within which that can be done.
Right. And it is very different from the classroom, and therefore all of these redesigns are different from what was going on before. So we need to know maybe the structure, the faculty just talked about what would happen, but there was nothing written down. Well, now we have to have all kinds of things that are very clear to students. It doesn't necessarily mean it was a change, but the delivery mode might have been different in the new way. So you can learn a lot when students say, I didn't have a clue what to do first.
Okay, we have a question that's come in now, and it's kind of a where the rubber meets the road type question. This is from someone who I believe is teaching a social science lecture course for 1,000+ students, and from a research standpoint would like to know about best practice and what kinds of things do you recommend to someone who has 1,000+ students in a more traditional lecture kind of thing. I know one thing might be to, start a course redesign process.
I would vote for that.
But Sloan C is always emphasizing best practice, and of course the connection between research and best practice is important. So I'm going to ask each of you for a comment about what advice would you give to this person who has this 1,000+ learners in a lecture environment?
You want to go first, or do you want me to?
Two things we know are that learning is a social process and it's interactive. So any ways that you can do things that have students in that large lecture break up into smaller groups and interact with each other and then feedback to the group would be the absolute first thing I would suggest.
I would absolutely agree. And actually, we have a project going on at one of the Missouri institutions that's in psychology. That's a gigantic lecture like that. And we have a process we call small within large, and they're applying that there. And they've built learning teams early on in the term, and these teams work together in the lecture. They also then they can report back their results using clickers and other kinds of summary ways. The other thing that they do is they work together with an undergraduate learning assistant online. So they do some discussion online, come back to the lecture, work on things in lecture, and they've raised the level of discourse in this course because the students are working together prior to lecture. So they really aren't lecturing, they're meeting in a larger group with the small within large and then having discussions about concepts in the small group, reporting back. The faculty member can call on people, why did you think this group 12? Why didn't you agree with them, group 14? And so there are a lot of actually very interactive things going on using technology, but using this small group within a large group activity.
Great, good. I have one thing that I want to share with all of you before we go on with the questions, and we're getting quite a number. You have a real opportunity today for becoming a Sloan C member by attending this symposium. And you can become an individual member, and there is a discount. And if you look at this slide, take this information and the URL and use that code, and you get a discount on your Sloan C individual membership. So that's a little promo, a little opportunity. If you like what you're hearing here today, you're going to learn more when you're involved with the consortium. And I'll tell you that the Sloan C group puts everybody to work. So put on your volunteer hat. You'll get a chance to do that too. We're trying to scale the number of volunteers involved. Is Frank still with us? I have a question that I would like Frank's comment on, but I'm not sure in terms of our connection to PACE.
I'm here.
Oh, great. Frank is there. Fabulous. Well, I know in addition to online learning, you've spent a lot of time looking at globalization. That was one of your portfolios when you were at the foundation. And we have a person that wants to know what we're going to do about this question of scale and issues like translations across international boundaries, not only language translations, but they want to know about cultural kinds of things. I think it's a little different meaning of culture than perhaps the academic culture change you were talking about. But I know you're a worldwide person, so what comments do you have about what's coming for global scale?
Well, yeah, that's a question that's a tough one. But let me answer it this way: like many things that are difficult, it's best to learn by doing something. And in a case like this, it has struck me for a while that we simply need better collaboration on courses that might be shared internationally. We do very little of that. If someone knows of good examples, I'd like to hear about them myself. My feeling is we need to get started, and we need to work on joint courses. You know, we have connections with Arabic countries, we have connections with Spanish countries, with Latin America, with Asia. There's quite a bit of opportunity for us to get started and to begin to address the question, which I think is an important question. I just don't think we'll come to grips with it in the abstract. You've got to do it. And the best way to do it is to start small.
I think that's very interesting, Frank. And one of the questions we've had is looking at something like the new MOOC phenomena. And a lot of that is certainly happening, at least starting out as global in nature. Karen, I'm going to ask you just for not to tell us everything that we don't know yet about MOOCs, but I think you mentioned it, so it's fair game in your in your questions. So just a comment or two about MOOCs in the global.
You always go to me with the hard questions.
Of course.
Right? I think MOOCs are really an interesting phenomenon, and I'm not convinced yet, but there's been so much uptake on it, and it's happened so very quickly, and so many important institutions are getting involved that, that I think it's really interesting. I teach a course in online learning, and I'm making all my students take a MOOC, or at least lurk in a MOOC for this semester, because I'm very curious to see what it's like from a student perspective. Because if you look at, and I think that's a good thing that Carolyn mentioned, because if we're looking at these things a lot in terms of a global perspective, but what we really need to know is how they will work from a student perspective, and also how students can get credit for doing them and how they will be taken in by other institutions. So I don't know the answers to that, but I honestly do know people are working on it. And I think they're going to figure quite a lot, at least as transfer credits or other ways of moving people towards degree more quickly.
Very good. Well, I think we're all interested. It's kind of exciting to have a new word, and I liked your phrase, lurking in a MOOC, and Frank has the mesh of scale. I mean, we got a whole new set of things here to be talking about. We have a question that really relates to the last Research Symposia, and I think that's interesting. We talked about STEM very recently, and we did that in a global context too. Everybody knows how important the STEM fields are, and trying to work on this, and so they're really asking from a research standpoint into practice, what do we know about helping people learn in the STEM fields? Carolyn, I know both you and Karen have worked on that. Just a couple of comments about your ideas in terms of what we can do to better improve what we're doing with STEM.
Okay. Obviously, the example at the University of Alabama that continues to a number of other institutions is the Emporium model for mathematics, where they're doing math, not watching math. One of the other interesting projects that we've had is at Mississippi State University. They use the Emporium in statics, which is an introductory engineering course, because what they found was, and remember this is done by the experts in engineering, I'm just reporting what they did, I'm not the expert in engineering, but they found in statics there were 6 principles. Lecturing about them was the easy part. Applying them in various situations is the difficult part. What they were doing was lecturing on the easy part and sending students back to their dorms or apartments to do the hard part. So what they do now is they stream the lectures, the faculty have made them themselves, and the class time is spent in a lab working individually or in small groups with assistants in the lab to apply those principles. And so they've reorganized the course, so the students are doing the hard part with assistants and doing the easy part without any faculty there because they don't need them. And that's the kind of thing people need to think through. As I said, I'm not an engineer, but when the engineers heard about the Emporium, they could immediately see the application to their fields. And that's what we need. We need people who understand the principles, who can then say, okay, in my field, this will work the best. We can't always tell you that. We can question you, and the engineering example is the perfect example of how that happened. I think there's a lot of application in the STEM field, and we have a lot of examples in the sciences, etc., but the engineering one was really pretty interesting.
I have one last question before we go to our next presenter, and this time goes fast when we're getting lots of questions, which is great. We really appreciate your taking time to send us questions. I don't know, this one is kind of hard and kind of simple. It says, what is the right instructor to student ratio? And this is a concept that we've had around for a very long time, instructor-student ratio. This is an opportunity to say, with respect to scale, you mentioned some things in both of the remarks about instructors and different ways of looking at it. You could either comment on the construct or on how to help people think about that and talk about that, because we hear it everywhere, you know, the instructor-student ratio.
We have a process that we use where we analyze the traditional course, whatever the traditional course structure is at your institution, and then you analyze what the redesign will look like. And it has to do with all the tasks, and they're broken down quite small, that go on in offering a course. And we look at what the faculty member's been doing, and then we look at, in the redesign, what does the faculty need to do? Where is your expertise particularly important? And then what are things that you've always done because there was nobody else to do them? And I tell a little joke where I can run those machines that throw out the old purple paper. You know, I can do that. You ought to analyze what you need to do and then what other folks can do. Undergraduate learning assistants, graduate students, the technology, what can you shift to the technology? And that's how we make decisions about what is the faculty role, because it need not be everything, but there are some very key things that faculty need to do.
Last comment to you, Karen, if you have anything you want to say about that, and then we're going to go on to our next presenter.
I think Carolyn said it all. There isn't any perfect student-faculty ratio. But what you want to do is be making sure that the students are interacting with somebody.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of variables in all of this.
Absolutely.
So we just have to really get better and better at trying to figure all of that out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, folks, we've had a very lively question and answer session, and we are going to have another session in about 15 minutes. So get your questions coming in. If we don't get them all involved in the program today, we will come back to you. We hope this stimulates some further discussion in a variety of areas. Now we're going to go to Dr. Marie Cini. And Dr. Cini is interim provost at the University of Maryland University College. And she's also the chief academic officer. She's very experienced in an institution that's been working with scale for a very long time. And she was given a major challenge to not only look at course scaling, and she's going to talk about course scaling some too, but scaling a whole program in an undergraduate area. And she's going to talk about an outcome-focused design, and she's also going to talk about that magic word, quality. So Dr. Cini, if you're with us, I'd appreciate it if you take us through that challenge that you've had.
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone from Maryland. And I wanted to say a couple of things before I jump into my slides. The first one is that I'm glad that Karen went over the McKinsey reports, and I think Karen's comments are very important, and I want to talk about them as I go through my slides, in particular the goal of education, because I think that sometimes we have a misunderstanding that scale means that it's really just the factory model, and we can't look at some of those larger questions in terms of student outcomes of learning. So, in fact, I'd like to start with the word scale, because I think it has sometimes it has baggage that comes with it. We think of scale as a franchise model, right? So if you have one McDonald's, you can have 200 McDonald's. And in the prior to, I think, technology and systems approach to online education, we really thought of quality as something that equated with small and artisan and sort of a craftsperson model. But I think with technology and different ways of thinking, we now can see that scale and quality can both also increase at the same time if you design things carefully and you think it through. By quality, I'm really talking about serving students and making sure that they reach their learning outcomes. So let me talk to you about what we did when I was the dean of the undergraduate school here at the University of Maryland University College. We had been working, of course, on learning outcomes assessment, and we discovered that our curriculum was like many curricula across the country. It was really an amalgam of a number of different courses, and at certain times, certain programs were more integrated than others, but there wasn't a comprehensive approach to how we designed curricula starting from that level. And so, believe it or not, Jan, you said I was given this task. I actually took this task on. I think maybe sometimes I was crazy, but many of my directors would say, wouldn't it be great if we could start all over again, because they saw different difficulties in the curriculum. And so one day I said, well, why don't we? I actually know some folks who might be able to help us with this. And so we set out to make sure that we were combining access with quality, because we are an open access educational institution, and we really believe that by redesigning our curriculum, starting with programs, that we would be giving our students better quality. Just to give you some sense of what we're talking about, the undergraduate school has, give or take a few, 67,000 students throughout the world, primarily online, but a small minority actually face-to-face and in hybrid. We have over 170 face-to-face and hybrid locations, and of course online being very large. And we need, very simply, to make sure that our students are achieving similar learning outcomes when they're enrolled in the same course, no matter where they are or what modality they're taking the course in. And so our solution, and as I said, we took this on. I have to really thank my undergraduate school program directors and faculty. We redesigned the entire undergraduate curriculum, which represents 32 programs and over 1,200 courses. This was no mean feat, and the fact that those folks are still working with me and talking to me is something that I will always be appreciative of. If you looked at our undergraduate curriculum prior to this, you would note that it was, again, as I mentioned, an amalgam of courses. So, X number of courses, students take them, add them all up, and that represented their program. We were asking them, in many ways, to conceptualize what that program meant for them. We needed to change how we were thinking, as opposed to asking our students to do all of that thinking. So the slide that says we needed to invert our thinking it's kind of cute, but it's exactly what we had to do. We had to turn our processes upside down. And so we came up with a large-scale project called Project Segway, which at the time stood for Supporting Educational Goals for Undergraduate Excellence. But in honor of today's presentation, I'd like to rename it Scaling Educational Goals for Undergraduate Excellence. And I think that works very well. It's exactly what we did. We liked what Segway meant, as you spelled it out, but we also liked the word Segway as sort of a brand for our project, because we wanted to make a smooth transition from our old curriculum to our new curriculum and not be disruptive, and so that was also a major program goal. One of our goals, the slide that actually has the 4 goals in terms of students, was number 1, and this was really the primary one. We wanted to provide consistent learning experiences for students. We also have students who travel around quite a bit, not only our military students, but any of our adult learners who are very busy. They might start taking courses while they're living in one part of the country and then move to another part of the country or even another country altogether. They might combine some hybrid courses in one location with online courses at other times. And we had to have a seamless pathway so that students could complete a program any place, anytime, anywhere. We also wanted to build in opportunities for student success. We had been getting into sort of a model of if we wanted to augment student success initiatives, we would create add-ons. So extra 1-credit courses or extracurricular success initiatives, and we wanted those embedded in the curriculum. Finally, what we really did, and this was not a goal at the time, but I have to say it must have been in our minds somewhere because it ended up being very important. We also were laying the foundation to develop competency-based forms of learning, because now we have, we like to call it, we have a GPS for our curriculum. We can tell you the learning outcomes in any course, any program, and where they are, students actually are learning those things. So as I said, it's a program-based process that we did. Our major question was, what can students do as a result of the program? Once we answered that question, we then went and derived courses from those program goals, and then we redesigned our courses into 8-week segments. We had been teaching 8 weeks online and hybrid for a very long time. We hadn't been doing it online because there was this interesting culture here, speaking of culture, that there was a sense that you can't do online learning in 8 weeks, and that, it didn't make sense to me, because if you can do it face-to-face, you can do it online. So we redesigned everything into 8 weeks. Our programs now and our courses are outcomes-driven. We had experts working with us to help develop these outcomes for an outside context. We realized that it's very easy for faculty and academic administrators to be very inward thinking, what we want to accomplish in our course, and we hadn't thought enough about how do we link that to the outside world. So our programs and our courses have real-world outcomes, and we now know that we're responsible for teaching them in here what they need to know out there. I want to make a comment, though. These are not just all workforce-relevant outcomes. Sometimes we've been criticized of just being a training program. We really carefully thought through that we want to prepare our students for a workforce, also community and society. And so we have many of those Jeffersonian ideals embedded in our curriculum. We based our work on the work of Dr. Ruth Steele, who was at Oregon State University for a number of years, is now an emeritus and actually works with universities on her outcomes-based curriculum model. And she was really a key driver in this. So, as I said, we started with program outcomes. We brought in experts, and we made sure that as we designed the 8-week courses that we based it on research. Again, we got questions, and many people will get questions about accelerated learning. There's a wonderful organization called the Council for Accelerated Programs at www.cap.org, and they have a number of resources on their website and certainly research projects on there. What you find when you look at accelerated programs is that if they're well designed, students learn as much, if not more, and often retain more in the 8 weeks than they do over longer periods of time. And so good practice is based on good research, and if you do it right, the 8 weeks was very, very good for an adult student. Our faculty were very involved in this redesign. We had, you see pictures of faculty sitting around and talking about their courses and programs with lots and lots of sticky notes. We had over 600 of our full-time and adjunct faculty involved over the course of the 2-year project. I wanted to give you an example on the slide that says more robust outcomes. You know, I think we all use Bloom's taxonomy to gauge our cognitive outcomes that we want our students to achieve in courses. As we reviewed our entire curriculum, we realized that although we were using Bloom's, we weren't always making sure that the levels were being developed in a fashion that students would start at the lowest levels and move to the higher levels. They seemed to be mixed, especially as they moved across disciplines, say from a gen ed, back to their major. And we often didn't take them thoughtfully and intentionally enough to the highest levels of, say, analysis and synthesis. So our old program outcomes are pretty standard. I mean, nobody would fault them, but things like recognize and discuss and explain, which are okay, but in the 21st century, those aren't the kinds of things that we sit around and do. We apply, we analyze, we synthesize, and so you'll find that many more of our courses and our programs really take the students to that higher level. We started with the programs. We then redesigned each course. And in fact, in several programs, we found that there were courses that we could eliminate because there were no program outcomes that really led to certain courses. It was really eye-opening for our program directors in terms of what we had, allowed to sort of creep into the curriculum over time. Now that Segue is completed, our culture has really shifted. We don't think in terms of just courses anymore. Our faculty and directors think about their program. Courses come after that. Our new curriculum is sequenced, it is consistent, it's more integrated than ever before, and it's uncluttered so that students are learning what they need to learn and in the manner that they need to. Now, we really believe in applied research to make sure, and evaluation to make sure that we know what's happening in all of this, and so we've been doing in-depth evaluations of our new curriculum, and we found that we had a 5% decrease in withdrawals in those courses, which is pretty amazing. Similar final grades across the board, except with the new curriculum, there's a slight increase in the number of A's. We believe there's more learning going on, but we want to triangulate that with our learning outcomes assessment program. There are pain points. I think one of the speakers referenced we never talk about the negatives from research. Well, we found a couple of pain points. One is faculty workload, and we're going to continue to look at that. We think some of it is getting used to 8 weeks, and some of it is getting used to the new learning outcomes. And just like online learning, we believe that this will get easier over time, but we will continue to look at that. And I think students were a little bit taken aback by how much work there was to do in 8 weeks, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we will continue working on that. In terms of the future, as I said, we now have the groundwork. We have a curriculum with a GPS, global positioning system. We know where to find things. If we find that students are not learning what we think they should be learning, we can go back and change the curriculum, change how we teach in the curriculum. Some of the things that we're going to be looking at will be using this curriculum as a foundation and then developing new modalities so that students can go through in ways that might work best for them. So we now have more opportunities for true competency-based learning or individualized pathways, students learning with a mentor as opposed to necessarily being in a class of 25 or 30 students. We're working very much on learner analytics and believe that with good data coming out of our learner analytics projects, we'll be able to help students more successfully choose a pathway through their curriculum. And it could be, 2 or 3 different modalities. It could be a combination of online, some hybrid, some competency-based. Perhaps they already have certain kinds of knowledge. At the end of the day, what we believe the real beauty of this is that we will be able to scale individualized learning. And if we have a vision for all of this, that's really where we'd like to head and believe that there's research to be done there.
I have a question already for you that's come in.
Okay.
And it's related to something that Frank brought up earlier. We've been doing a lot of talking about redesign of courses, redesign of programs, curricula, etc. I believe Frank had something up there called cost effectiveness. And I know you mentioned it, Carolyn mentioned it, Karen mentioned it. But I'm wondering, as you're thinking about that question of cost effectiveness, you talked about evaluating. What are you looking for with respect to scale and that question of cost effectiveness?
Well, let me be really honest. This 2-year project, I wouldn't say it was cost effective. I mean, I'm kind of saying that tongue-in-cheek, but we put a bit of an investment into this to lay the groundwork. However, we believe that the affordability will be going forward. And so for us now, whenever we run a course, and often our courses, especially what would be the equivalent of a 1,000-student social studies course at a traditional large university, for us would be 100 sections with, or 200 sections with X number of students in each one. We can add another section quickly. If we have 25 more students, we can add a faculty member who has a guide. They're not canned courses, but they're designed enough that a new instructor, even if we've hired them 2 days ago, if they know how to teach online, can take the material and do a really good job. And so we find that the cost effectiveness will be as we actually run these over and over again. And it's now easier to more consistently review the curricula because we know exactly where to find things. We're not hunting around trying to figure out where did students learn critical learning. We know where we've embedded it. And so that will be a big part of cost savings in the future for us.
Great. We'll come back to you with a couple more questions in a moment, Marie, but I think we have Frank actually in person coming to us now, and he's not on the phone, but he's on high-tech video. So, Frank, I'm interested to go back to you. You've been listening to these presentations. You put up 2 big things. One was cost effectiveness, the other one was access. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to make any comments you'd like to make about both of those and what you've heard. We're getting lots of questions coming in about the learner-driven, about the curriculum and course redesign, but I think we need to hearken back to those as well.
Thanks. Thanks, Janet. Let me say, actually, there are three topics I wanted to comment on. One is the STEM. I think the STEM is the examples that Carolyn gave, very good ones. And I think it's a special case. It needs special attention. And I'm trying to get a special interest group started within Sloan C that will focus on STEM. And one element of it will be this question of scale and STEM. So we'll come back to that many times over. I just wanted everyone to know that it's a flame that we will keep alive. On the issue of access, I think it is pretty much in the consciousness of all of us. And so it fits with everything that I've heard today, that access will improve and increase as we focus on scale in the different ways that we've talked about it today. So it's on the, should I say, the non-controversial side of things. It's something we all sign up for. Cost effectiveness is much trickier. When you begin to talk about cost and education, there's always a degree of apology, and we all sort of say, well, of course, we're not talking about, you know, hamburgers and McDonald's and so forth. But I think one has to be realistic and say that economies of scale are something we have to look for. And I think the NCAT origins had that idea tucked in there. Not overtly perhaps, but it's always been there. It's always been in my mind. I think it's very important. And I'm glad we're talking about it. And my belief is that what matters is quality. If you can do it for $1, do it. Why spend $10,000 and then pretend it's higher quality? Measure the quality, provide a quality product. So I welcome the sort of addition of cost effectiveness to our thinking. I'm pleased with what I've heard. I think it's very much on track. And we should be not covert about it, but overt in stating that, quite frankly, our goal is quality, and we do want economies of scale. As we grow online learning, we expect that cost effectiveness will increase. What you can do for $1 in small numbers, we can do with larger numbers for the same dollar.
I think that's great, and lots to think about. I think that cost effectiveness for all of us is really easy to say. It's one of those things we have to be careful about. We're making up new words here. We have to remember the real meaning and the definition, if you will, of some of the other concepts that, like cost effectiveness, it's always been there. But being honest and true to that and looking at that in the research agenda is really important. We'll be coming back to you later on for some additional comments. But we got a question that I think cuts across the board is terribly important. I'm going to ask Marie to take the first shot, and then I'm going to come to Carolyn and Karen here. It has to do with training faculty. If we're going to make all these changes and do things differently, what's the training agenda here? What are the opportunities for people to learn? This isn't going to happen like magic, and there are lots of challenges. Marie, in your whole redesign effort, where was faculty development and training in the picture?
It was a key part of this, and we had a sub-project group working on that. So it started with communication. It got to the point when people were sick of the word segue, and I said, great. If people are sick of it, that means they've actually heard of it. Because in many institutions, things go on, large things go on, and you know we live in our little worlds and we don't hear about it. So here, everybody heard about it. And we put together specific trainings, and we drove it through many of our regular yearly events. So any faculty meeting, you know, we have big ones in the fall and the spring. We worked on faculty development, faculty training, what it meant for faculty. We actually asked all of our faculty and we've got, thousands of adjuncts and a large number of full-time faculty to all go through a 1-week retraining for teaching online using this model. So there are significant implications for faculty training, and they have to happen hand in hand. You can't redesign the curriculum and then let faculty just each go in and do what they're used to doing, because it just won't work. It won't change.
Another question that's come in from several different people in different ways, and I'm going to go to you first, Marie, because I know you won't be back in the second half of the program, and we'll have a chance to talk with the others then. But this has to do with integrity, and as you scale and you have large classrooms and you have a very different kind of configuration. We've heard this with respect to MOOCs too in the last several weeks. What are the integrity issues? How do you deal with integrity issues? What are you doing? We all know technology may make this all easier and better for us in the future, but what are your thoughts about that?
Well, if we're talking about academic integrity, there's plagiarism, which we've always dealt with, and you'll have it everywhere. But now, in terms of online, we've added this concern about identity verification. Although, in any large classroom, it's hard to know your student's identity unless you're asking them for their IDs every time they come in. But be that as it may, I think technology is part of the answer. But I hate to go right to technology. We tell our faculty the first place to think about issues of integrity is getting to know your online students, which you certainly can do, and pacing out any of their material. So instead of just having them hand in a paper at the very end, have them hand in, outlines or just smaller pieces all the way through. So you can do things in terms of learning activities. At the same time, this is important. So, we use Turnitin, and we are starting to look at some of the many technologies out there for identity authentication. We haven't made any decisions, but as the technology moves forward, if there's one that is a good combination of not invading students' privacy, being low cost, and giving us some surety that the student who signed up is the student who's on the other end of the computer, we will consider moving in that direction.
Thanks very much, Marie, and we're coming up on the end of this first portion of our program. I do want to say a couple of things before we break. We've had several people ask for that code again so that you can sign up to get your individual membership. I have the slide up, so if we want to look at that, please put down your use code if you want to enter that and you want to sign up as an individual member of Sloan C. The other thing I wanted to mention before we go to the break is several of you have asked about graduate programs. We've spent a lot of time talking about undergraduate programs here today, and I have to tell you, the next speaker, after we come back from break, is going to focus on graduate programs and also professional education. So we weren't forgetting you. We're just kind of doing a progression here. But Dr. Bill Riffee, who is Dean of the College of Pharmacy at the University of Florida, is going to share a major scaling effort in that college. So we'll come back, have that presentation. We still have a lot of questions here that you've asked that we'll get to as we can. We'll take more questions. And we'll also hear from Rio Salado and about their community college scaling effort. Karen mentioned them early. Carolyn did as well. They're a very different kind of institution, and we'll learn a lot more about what they're doing. So take a quick break. Do come back. I think you probably got now about 28 minutes, but we look forward to seeing you again at 1 o'clock Eastern. Thank you. Welcome back. We're very happy you could rejoin us for Scaling Online Education, the research symposium that's coming to you from the Sloan Consortium. We've had some great conversation going on in the Commons, and we've got questions and people signing up for Sloan membership and more to come. So we've had a few events in real life while we've been on break. We're next going to hear from Dr. William Riffee, who is Dean of the College of Pharmacy at the University of Florida. And Bill, I think I'm going to let you tell people what happened in the real world. I know you're standing by, sitting there, but in this world, you never know what's going to happen. So Bill Riffee is going to talk to us about scaling in this really important graduate program at the University of Florida. But Bill, what happened to you on the break?
Well, it was a very interesting time. I went up to my office to meet with some donors, and the donor handed me a check for $125,000, and I shook his hand, and then the fire alarm went off. So the building had to be evacuated, so we just got back here about 5 minutes ago, and we're ready to go here in the real world of academia. And it's very interesting what goes on during a fire drill. Apparently we had one last week, and the faculty and staff didn't follow the directions, so we had to have another one this week to see if we could get everybody out of the building. Very interesting time. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share with all of you the reasons that we need to scale. And I'm going to give you a case study here at the University of Florida. We are a comprehensive university, a Research university, and we have been very active in the area of distance education, and then we began to see that we could expand this. So I wanted to talk to you about the reasons we wanted to scale. First of all, we wanted to seek a method to have all of those in the metropolitan areas in Florida have access to a professional degree in pharmacy. We have 3 or 4 programs that are located in cities, but none in Tampa, none in Orlando, and there wasn't any in Jacksonville. So we did that, and we had to learn to scale in that area. We also wanted to increase the availability of the Doctor of Pharmacy to those pharmacists who already had a baccalaureate degree in pharmacy, and that became a nationwide program. We wanted to increase the availability of our masters in pharmaceutical sciences, and we had to scale that as well to go from a certain number to a larger number. And finally, 2 things: we wanted to increase revenue, and we also wanted to retain the high quality that our college is known for in the academy. So the history of what we have done is because of the fact that we wanted to scale. We increased our first professional degree student body from 130 to 300 per class. Now that equals to 1,200 in our first professional degree program. We wanted to increase our post-baccalaureate PharmD students from a beginning of 25, and now we're at about 500 per academic year. And we wanted to increase our master's program, and what happened is we went from about 12 master's students to now 450 students in those programs annually. Now, the other result from that is that we have established a non-credit bearing course in pharmacy technician training, and we now have 300 students in that program as well. So altogether, the College of Pharmacy is averaging about 2,500 students studying at a distance in our college. So what are the outcomes of these scales to be able to get up to where we are today? The professional degree students have to take a national board once they finish their program. And our students who study at a distance actually performed as well or above the national average, certainly above the state average in Florida. We've also had our working professional PharmD program expand the number of Doctor of Pharmacy degree holders out there. And the outcome of this program is kind of unique because these students are already employed. They are working full-time while going to school in the evenings when they study, and on the weekends when they meet with their facilitators. And most of them find that their positions change. They go from either one employer to another with better benefits and better salary, or their responsibilities are expanded in their current workplace. We've also had outcomes in our master's program, and you can see from this slide where our students go out of these programs. They go to large pharmaceutical companies, retail pharmacy chains, managed care companies, hospitals and hospital chains, and so forth and so on. Our forensic program students will very often go into law enforcement organizations. The financial outcomes. Now, I want to make sure that you're seeing these slides because I can't see the program being returned to me at the present time. All I see is one of our presenters eating lunch. So I want to make sure that I'm able to see the slides. So if the director would make sure that that's happening, I would appreciate it. The financial outcomes, the first professional degree program has doubled our state budget, which is very, very significant. Our working professional PharmD program and our master's program, as well as all the other programs that we have at a distance, yield about $20 million a year, which is a significant revenue stream for our college and helps us offset the state cuts that you've heard about in the press. Now, I want to talk about leverage. It's important to leverage the quality of our faculty and to expand our programs. We don't want to build another program in another city and double the number of faculty that we have in the college by recreating the faculty in that city. So we use video streaming, we do video capture, it's hosted and off campus, and it's very high quality, and it's a great product. And it's important that we develop also our blended approach, which is that the faculty are aided by faculty practitioners or our facilitators, and in these blended programs. So they meet with them very periodically. We very much believe that we need to get into the area of leveraging our faculty using not only technology, but using the PharmD faculty, the master's faculty that are already in the locations where we are, have students to meet with them periodically and enter into active learning exercises. But again, the technology we use is video capture. We use discussion boards, we use virtual office hours, and also a lot of use of collaborative software synchronously. So we have also the faculty facilitators are paid part-time, and they bring again the active learning component of our blended format. These people bring their active practice into the sessions with the students and can actually bring what they learned in the video content to bear in a applied manner for the students. These faculty facilitators are vetted through our faculty, approved through our faculty, and they're usually selected from a cadre of nationally known facilitators in various cities that have been met by our own faculty and are nationally known in their own fields of specialty. There was some comments about the student-faculty ratio, and we still hear that on this campus, that we want to reduce the student-faculty ratio. That's a very bricks and mortar approach to distance education. We do believe in a facilitator-student ratio, but it differs from one particular course or a program to another. But it's a very important thing that you look into what's the best ratio of students at a distance to the facilitator that's used in those programs. The critical factors that we found when we began to scale is when we went outside of Florida, we found that we had to seek the approval of every state that we went into. Some states say, yeah, it's okay, go ahead, no problem. But a lot of states, if you meet physically on their soil, they want to be in charge of your program. They will say you have to have physical facilities and so forth. That's why you'll see a lot of University of Phoenix buildings in some of the major cities to give them a physical presence in a state. We have not done that. We have been able to work within our hospital systems and large employer groups to be able to say we do have a physical presence, and most states have obliged with us. I will say, as a case study, we have had a very interesting case in Connecticut where they sent us a cease and desist letter because we wouldn't build a building in Connecticut. So we moved our students to the military academy at West Point, figuring that the guns there were probably large enough to keep the people in Connecticut who wanted to run us out away. That's sort of a humorous thing. But my primary fantasy was to have our group meet in Connecticut and let the press know and let the state officials know, and have them come in and arrest our students, put them in handcuffs, walk them out the front door, and have the press take pictures, and the headlines being "Students Arrested for Learning." I always thought that would be an awesome thing for distance education and perception. I do want to talk about international work. You do need to seek a partner when you go into an international venue. Make sure that you are culturally competent within that environment, and that the partnering institution you have has been accredited and approved by the government. This is true all over the place. It's true in China and India and the Middle East. So be careful in setting up international programs that you do try to work with internal groups there to help you establish your own program and safeguard your reputation as well as theirs. Okay, so where do we stand as a College of Pharmacy? We significantly have increased our student body and our ability to provide professional and graduate education, and we would grow infinitely if we have students who want to be educated by us. We have the facility to scale to any amount, any number of students throughout the U.S. And I think one of the things that we need to work on is the public perception. There's a lot of work showing that online education, and especially blended education, is as good, if not better, than the traditional approach to education. And we need to get that out to the public. We need them to understand what's going on. And the best PR that we have for that out of my college are the people that have gone through the program. They attest to its rigor, they attest to its excellence, and because of what they have done after they finished our program, they are walking advertisements for how well our program works. And lastly, we need to find some research strategies that help determine the outcomes of our programs a little beyond our anecdotes, and perhaps to do sort of a meta-analysis rather than a college-by-college, course-by-course. So that's where I will leave it, and I look forward to hearing any questions that you might have about our programs here. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thanks so much, Bill. I want to assure you all the slides came through beautifully, irrespective of what you were seeing coming back to you. Everything was great. And also, we're very appreciative that you were able to make it back in the building after the fire drill and look so cool and calm and collected. So we know that you're an experienced dean who's been working on scaling online learning for quite a while, because you get tested in this environment. We already have quite a few questions coming in for you, and we're going to get to the question and answer period very shortly. So don't go out, don't do anything else, stay there, and we'll be coming back to you as we get into that after a little bit. We'd like to go now to Dr. Ed Kelty, who is Vice President for Strategy at Rio Salado Community College, and Ed is also the CIO there. He's been mentioned along with Rio Salado several times during this program, and I hope that it will serve as an example from the community college sector, which we haven't had yet today. We've heard now at the course the degree, undergraduate, graduate, professional education, but Rio brings us a different set of students, different challenges, and I think a very interesting model. Ed, we've been delighted to work with you getting ready for this program, and we're very anxious to hear your story. So we're going to go to you at Rio Salado and hear from you, and then we'll be taking questions for everybody.
That's great. Thank you. And I really appreciate it being invited to participate in this presentation today, in this webinar, to help folks around the country see how we scale. I've worked at Rio Salado for 23 years, and when I first started working at Rio, I was the only tech guy there. And so it was an interesting evolution that I've seen over the last couple of decades. What I want to do today is talk a little bit about the college as a whole, move on into what our perspective is from an institutional standpoint for scaling, and then kind of tell you a little bit about where we've gone and where we're heading. It's interesting to think that an institution of our size with 70,000 students only has 23 full-time faculty and about 500 full-time employees. So Rio Salado was founded in 1978, and we were founded to challenge the limits of traditional education. We have always been called serving students that are unserved or underserved areas of Maricopa County and now out of state. One of the things that I think was very interesting and challenging when we started it was our original vision statement, which we still have today, which is we astonish our customers. About 5 years ago, we changed that by adding the explanation point. And quite honestly, that took about a week or two of discussion before we moved to doing that. And if you consider astonishing your customers as your primary vision, and I can assure you everyone at Rio, every employee, every adjunct faculty can recite that vision, that's quite a challenge to live up to. Our core practices are learning, innovating, and partnering, and our culture really supports innovation and a systems approach, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we move through. As I mentioned a minute ago, we have 70,000 students that we serve annually. About 43,000 of those students are online. The average age is 29 years right now, and if you look over the last 5 to 7 years, our demographics have changed slightly. It used to be they were in their mid-30s and not quite as computer savvy. Now we have a lot of younger students coming in and participating in our online classes that have very few questions about the technology and much more about the content and delivery. We also developed in 2004 our own online learning system, our own LMS. And these are some innovations that we've done over the years to try to facilitate student success. So we actually looked at several different online learning packages throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, and we couldn't find a product that really met our needs. So we partnered with Microsoft, and we ended up developing our own LMS built on top of SharePoint. Again, we have about 43,000 students in the system. We have 23 residential or full-time faculty that support it. One of the things that's a bit unique about Rio is we have regular Monday starts. So a student could start almost every Monday of the year if they wanted to. And I'm going to talk about some of the changes as we go down the presentation of how that's changed a little bit based on federal compliance issues and financial aid and such. One of the other interesting things about Rio is we never cancel a class, never cancel an online class. We have 24/7 student services, and we've had that since at least 2004. We have an electronic filing system, so any advisement and interaction the student has with someone at Rio is tracked, and so if they call back in any time of the day or night, any day of the week, that we always know what kind of information we've shared with them, and it doesn't need to always talk to the same person if a student calls back in. A couple of things we've also built into our online learning system is predictive analytics. So we've been piloting our predictive analytics in such a way that students log into the class in the online environment, and within 3 to 5 days, we can typically tell within the mid 70% accuracy if the student is going to be successful in those courses. And so we're putting upgrades into our system now to start doing dashboards and such for the faculty and the students to understand if they're green, they're doing great. If they're yellow, they might need a little help. And if they're red, then what interventions are we going to try to put forward to help them? We've also developed our own peer-to-peer plagiarism detector. And that system is also built into our online learning system, RioLearn. And it checks every essay and assignment turned in over the last 18 to 24 months to validate if it's similar to another student's. And if it is, it generates a report automatically to the faculty member, and then they take appropriate action. We do use Turnitin.com as well for some other kinds of courses, English and such, but we are mainly using our own internal plagiarism detector. Some of the things that everyone's talked about today about affordability and access, currently Rio's cost per student is 44% lower than the peer institutions nationally. Our tuition is only $76 a credit. In 2010, 2011, our growth was approximately 18%, and we're Arizona's largest community college in programs such as dual enrollment. We have over 8,000 students in our dual enrollment program. adult basic education, incarcerated entry, and so on. So a lot of different things went into producing that, and being able to support that many students and that diverse of group in the last 5 or 10 years. Our student success rate, according to IPEDS, is 42% compared to the 18% among the 100 peer institutions, and 45% of Rio graduates complete their program on time, which is again well above the 7%. The U.S. Department of Education also ranked Rio in the top 10 for the institutions giving out certificates in the last 7 out of 8 years. So we've 3,000 or 4,000 certificates a year we produce through a lot of our business and industry partnerships. We also have a course completion rate, and it says 68%, but I believe we're up to approximately 70% in the last academic year of students completing our courses, and that crosses all our students. So our online students, our in-person students, our hybrid students and such, we have a very good success rate. So I want to take a moment and tell you my personal perspective of why Rio is successful and what helps us scale. And interestingly enough, I would suggest it's our culture. And I also put on a slide, as the CIO of the college, I had to say technology. But our culture really drives everything here, and we've spent a great deal of time at Rio cultivating that into what I would say a can-do attitude. I could tell you quite honestly, and I'll give you a couple examples of how the employees of this institution literally think we can take on anything. I have not seen anything yet that they said, we can't do that, or it's too much work. And that's because of the culture that our organization started cultivating back in the mid to early 90s underneath leadership of Dr. Linda Thor. So one of the things we do for every single employee, doesn't matter if they're a president on down to the entry level and even our part-time folks, is we cultivate that culture by having them go through a Rio Way training. Sorry, that was easy, right? Rio Way training. Rio Way training takes a year. There is new employee orientation, which is in the first week or two, but the Rio Way training, which is actually produced and done through our online learning system, so every single employee understands what the students see and experience in an online world, takes the employee through all the history of Rio, our main focuses, our culture, our mission and vision, and it also explains how you get business done within the organization. And all of that has been really focusing on customer service, teamwork, innovation. And one of the biggest things is breaking down the boundaries between the different areas of the institution. I've been in education for a long time, and I've experienced quite a bit of environments within the Maricopa district and throughout the country with different peers and friends that I've made over the years. And I could say honestly that Rio has some politics, but literally our politics are minuscule compared to some other institutions that I've interacted with in the past. So let me talk a little bit about our culture and how it's shaped Rio Salado. And I'll give you one. I could spend another hour just talking about this, but I'll give you one example. Back in 1994, we created a group called the Development Team. The Development Team is made up of faculty, staff, and administrators. And when we started, I think there were probably 7 people on it, because back then we only had about 8 full-time faculty, and again now we have 23. That group meets every single week. They're the group that drives the innovation, the change, maintaining the culture, and really pushing things to get done at Rio. So to give you an example, they're the group that came up with the idea and helped facilitate the implementation of the upside-down instructional model, where we have primary faculty chairs that are full-time permanent and adjunct faculties that teach the course. We have one course in many sections. So we developed the course with subject matter experts, and that course is then taught throughout all sections. So we only have one copy of English 101 as an example. And all of our adjunct can teach it the same way with the same materials. They can augment the course, they can add their own materials, they can link to other information on the web, but they can't change the core course content and or assessments. The development team is what brought up the Every Monday Starts. And so it started with monthly starts, then it went to biweekly starts, and we kind of said, hey, how come we don't just do every week starts? And literally that team is what made it happen, because it's cross-functional between faculty, staff, and administrators. And I give you, for those out there that have worked in education for a while, one of the things that I really appreciate and respect is the fact that we all, when I said we have a can-do attitude, we all work and defend and back each other up. I have heard faculty defending the IT department when we have IT troubles, and on the rare occasion we have something going down. And that's because they have a better idea of what we all have to go through because we have such a collaborative culture and environment. And the other thing associated with our culture is we do not have a distance learning department. The entire college is online. Every single aspect of our institution is online. So when a student needs help, they don't have to go to some distance learning area. Anyone they call will be able to facilitate the help in their area, whether that's in person or on the phone or through chat or some other method. A couple other things that the development team has put together is they've really helped shape a lot of our technology. So again, I probably would have just said our culture is what makes things go, but really as the technology, we really focus on as much automation as possible. And I'll give you a couple of easy examples. Since the course content in our online system is developed in concert with an instructional design team and the faculty, when a course is done in the spring semester and a new section needs to open up, it automatically occurs. So we take information from our student record system, it automatically sets the class up, it rolls all the course materials over, it provisions all the access for the adjunct faculty and all the students, and literally the faculty member goes in and facilitates the success of the student by working with them in the online environment. The development team helped us with our customer relationship management system. We have a lot of automated processes in that area, where one of the fun things we have is sequential courses. So if a student in our online environment is about 3/4 of the way through English 101, we send them a really nice email automatically. It looks like it's coming from the instructor, and it says, "Ed, how are you doing? I see you're doing really well in English 101. Click here to automatically sign up for English 102, or click here to initiate a telephone call," and it calls a student and an advisor on the fly, and several other ways. So that's an example of some of our automation in CRM. Financial aid, I can tell you, a lot of folks have talked about compliance today and different aspects of the Department of Ed and requirements there. We had to develop an automated system to help facilitate our financial aid support. If you consider that we start every week, what that really means to us is that every student has their own unique semester. So automating that and helping the financial aid department work with that when we have about half of our students on financial aid, so around 20 to 25,000 students, that took a lot of effort, but now it's easy for the student and easy for the staff to understand what courses they can take when they're in their unique semester and be compliant with financial aid requirements. We also developed, as an example, our online learning system. This came out of the development team and our culture as well, to be multi-institutional. If you were to go to our online learning system, it's developed with a website called riolearn.org. It's not really associated with Rio Salado EDU per se, even though we run it. So any institution we partner with can have their own login page, their own logos, and that's another aspect that came out of our culture, because innovation and partnership is a big aspect of Rio Salado. And so I could go on, but I know we have a time frame. We have quite a few other things that we have automated. If anyone's interested, I can share some of that. But I give you an idea of where we're going. We are really pushing to be competency-based, personalized content. So we're currently in the process of finishing an RFP and evaluating vendors to see if we can find a product that would allow us to chunk our content in such a way that as a student is progressing through the content, the system assesses them on the fly and produces and gives them the content, gives them access and exposure to content they need more help with, and less access to content that they already know. In theory, that might help them accelerate through the class, but then we also have the issues of seat time and all of that, which is another one of those political issues that we need to deal with from policy standpoint. We're working on increasing partnerships both in the state of Arizona and out of state. And one of the folks mentioned earlier about having students in all the different states and the different compliance and state authorization issues. We have a whole team that works on that. We've chosen 3 or 4 or 5 states already. We were in all the states 2 years ago. I'm not saying that we're not in most of the states now, but we're really focusing on states that we can get through the compliance process well. California, Texas, and a few others. The states that require a physical presence, if we're offering classes there, we're evaluating the cost and return on investment kinds of things. So that's another one of those items that is under assessment right now. And lastly, we're really implementing something new to help our program seekers and non-program seekers. Since about half of our online students are program seekers, they could theoretically start every Monday, but that's not in their best interest, because if they start too quickly and they don't have all their materials, if they're on financial aid and the processing hasn't gone through. So we're actually splitting and dealing with our two groups of students a little differently. A non-program seeker can immediately get into the online system, sign up for a course, and if they signed up Monday morning, they can start that Monday. A program seeker actually has a set of guidelines that they need to go through to help them be successful. And that's what we're implementing this year right now in online advising, going through an orientation, making sure the financial aid is all ready, and getting them prepared to be successful in their online program. And those are just a few of the things that we're getting started and going down the road with right now.
It's extremely interesting and an awful lot of innovative practice, a lot of that based on other research and best practices, and we're delighted to hear about that. We're going to be taking some more questions from all of you now, so please be sure you get them in through social media. If you want to give us a call, we're happy to take your call as well. We already have quite a few that have come in. And I know Bill Riffee was continuing to have some fire bell problems there, but I believe he's able to take some questions. So I'm going to try this, Bill, if it works. We've had a couple of questions asking about what I would call the organizational issues, or it's a little bit different part of culture. You mentioned it. You are a dean. You are running a college. You have lots of programs going on, you have your faculty, and you're working all over the globe. People are kind of wondering how you make that happen. Is this a unique situation where you're able to build this and scale it because you are the dean? Or are there some tricks of the trade that other people might be able to employ? And I guess as part of that, I'd like to know about sustainability. You know, maybe you'll be offered some huge job somewhere, and then what happens to your program?
Well, that was timely. I'll try to trip through your questions in the order that you put them forward. It will, no matter what you start, it will require the cooperation and approval of those above you. As dean, I still have to work for our vice president and the president and provost, who have to look at my programs. Our curriculum committee of the university has to approve, just like any other program. So the dean, if I were an associate dean doing this, I would have to have the dean's full approval and cooperation. So I think a lot of our success has been due to my experience. I started this back in the late 70s at the University of Texas, was actually the first one to use digital transmission in higher education back in the late 80s. So as a pioneer, you have a lot of arrows in your back, but we've been able to overcome a lot of barriers. One of the things that I can say about our system is that our state legislature allows us, when we do a program at a distance, to recover costs and in some cases charge market rate, and those revenues come directly to the college. They do not come to the university. So we keep all of that revenue and we pay taxes on it as we spend it. That has allowed us a lot of flexibility in being able to hire people, to expand programs and so forth. So perhaps we're a little bit unique in that we have that flexibility. You do need a leader, and I think the difference here has been sort of, I was very much schooled in what works and what doesn't work, so we're able to move faster and scale much more easily. The reasons for that is that I've been able to surround myself with some very, very intelligent, hardworking people who have caught my vision and who run various aspects of our program at a distance. I'm the orchestra leader leading a bunch of very talented administrators and faculty in an orchestra that makes some very fine music. So that's how that works. Sustainability. As a matter of fact, I am stepping down at the end of this academic year as dean here at the University of Florida. And I don't know who will take my place. It'll be very interesting to see who the search committee comes up with and how the next generation of leadership will carry on what we've developed over the last 15 years that I've been here. This is my 17th year. All the programs that we've developed. I hope they carry them on. They are absolutely necessary for the financial health of this college. So it will be interesting to see. So Janet, you and the others will be able to watch University of Texas over the next, University of Florida over the next 5 years and find out what's going on. You know, I have made that slip so many times that my development officer is starting to fine me every time I say Texas instead of Florida. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, that was a very thorough and complete answer, Bill, and I almost think there's a research possibility built around looking at what you've been able to do in that college and what's happened and what some of the variables are that have created this success, and to watch what happens as that goes forward. You know, there are an awful lot of programs that run well because we have great champions who are out there and work day and night, just like you've been doing. And then when it comes time, you said you're stepping out, retiring from what you've been doing there, and I'm sure doing other things. But I really do think that there's a leadership question here about how do we all learn from each other so that we don't have all of our great programs fall down when somebody like you, who's really been the champion, the leader, made the space, been the orchestra leader, moves out. I think that's just an absolutely critical question, and I hope some of our scholars who are a part of this conference today will take that on, and we already have you as an example, and I think we could come up with several other folks who might be willing to contribute to that. So that's terrific. Bill, another question that we've had, and I would like to deal with this on the master's level particularly. People are wondering about how do you sequence courses when somebody's going through the master's degree at the graduate level, where you're talking about the kinds of things that you've been doing, where you have a limited number of faculty. We've heard what Ed's doing in terms of a radically different model. But how do you handle sequencing when you maybe can't offer everything every 8 weeks or every semester or whatever that model might be? That seems to be one of the things that people are very concerned about.
We have really Masters of Science in two areas. One is in forensics, and the other is in other areas like policy and regulation, pharmacoeconomics, pharmacoepidemiology, that sort of thing. And a lot of the ones I've just mentioned have core courses that can be offered simultaneously. There are maybe only 1 or 2 of these courses that are dependent on courses that have to be given before them. So it's a 2-year program that can accommodate a limited sequence, and there are not that many courses that are sequential in nature. So all of these are done a non-thesis, and they're done with a limited number of faculty, but many of the faculty teach courses in multiple master's programs that are the same. So there is a core that is spread over probably a half a dozen master's courses. In our forensics courses, we have a similar number of activities in which there are core courses that go over horizontally across a number of the individual master's concentrations. So there does not seem to be a problem with us sequencing courses, because we can probably have no more than 2 courses that are required before the others are given. The others are standalone.
Okay, great. I'd like to go to Ed. And Ed, I'd like to have you also address how you're dealing with sequencing of things. I think some people, the model you described is so different from what a lot of people are used to. how do you deal with who takes what when, and with the great individualization and the automation and the culture? But I think some people are asking, how do you really do that?
Well, as an open access institution in a community college, students who want to come in and take those 2 or 3 courses, and remember I said about half of our students online, 25,000 are here to take 2 or 3 courses, and then that's a supplement to some other educational institution or some personalized development they're trying to do. Those folks come in, take what they want, enroll, and then they do what they need to do. The sequencing for the other courses, if I understand your question right, is pretty well prescribed, just like any other educational institution and degree paths. We have a whole degree audit system that helps them know what to do. Our electronic student filing system that we developed for advising takes incoming transcripts, helps do the evaluation, and then identifies what courses match up with their program of study, and on they go. One of the nice things, and I think really interesting things that we've done is, to us, student success is not just completing a degree. If a student comes in from a business and industry partnership or some other area and says, I need these 7 different courses, we can lay that out in our student advisement system and say, okay, here are the 7 courses. You want to take them over the next 18 months, take this one in person, take this one online, and they sequence the whole activity for the student in our online system that we developed. We call it ESF, Electronic Student File. And the student can go in and review where they're at as they complete their courses. It automatically updates their path. And whether or not it's those 7 courses or a whole degree program, they can all be laid out in our electronic student filing system to help the students see what courses come next and what modality and what date, time, and process. So that's one of the ways we try to help the students in our environment.
Ed, another question for you. People want to know what's a kind of an average number of how many people are in courses and programs. You've given us the total student body. You've talked about what people are doing in numbers of courses, but I think they're just trying to get a sense of scale of how many of these individuals are all kind of studying the same thing or their own version of the same thing.
So from an enrollment standpoint, we average between 25 and 35 students per course online, and our faculty chairs develop that number based on the course and the competencies, and it's really an academic decision on the number of students per course. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you how many students are in each program, though I suppose if you went to Rio Salado EDU, I know we have a fact book on the website that does go into some of that. I do know that we have around 3,000 or 4,000 students every year that finish certificate programs, which are anywhere from 16 to 40 some odd credits in multiple areas. We have a dental hygienist program that we run 36 to 60 people through a year. And we're graduating about, I think it was 800 students a year right now in a 2-year degree that then helps take them on either in an AAS degree or off to a 4-year university. But to look at the exact numbers, please take a look at Rio Salado EDU and just search on Fact Book.
Great. I have one more question for you, and then I've got another one for Bill in just a minute. But I know that Arizona isn't located probably in the path of hurricanes. But you probably have some other kind of natural disaster, and I will say that anytime we're working with technology, there's always the possibility that we could lose our technology. And as we do more automation of very important systems, it's the question of, I would say, backup, redundancy. What do you do if everything falls apart? What's your redundancy plan? What's your plan for when the Arizona version of the hurricane hits?
Well, I think the closest thing would either be the haboob that comes through, which is that massive dust storm you probably see. Fortunately, they're not really strong enough to break windows or anything, at least not yet. But we are only about 1.5 miles away from Sky Harbor Airport, which is our international airport. So a couple things that we do is, obviously, we perform backups and take those backups off-site to a location 5 or 10 miles away. And as part of the Maricopa Community College District, there is a disaster recovery site in relevance to Rio about 35 miles north of us that holds a whole other data center that we're replicating our data to at the moment to allow us to bring services back online, not immediately, but probably within a few days. We're currently speccing out how much it would cost, and this is my personal goal, to load balance between our site and the site 40 miles away. So either site could go up or down, and the students and employees wouldn't notice. So that's our long-term goal. I'm hoping in the next year or so we'll have that. I've always had this dream as well, if there's anyone out there that might want to partner. I've got plenty of space in my computer room, and I was always thinking it would be nice to physically put a few servers in another state, in another educational institution's computer room. Maybe they could put some in ours and even do an extreme distance between us and them, and accomplish the same kind of load balancing farther than 40 miles away. That's just a dream, though.
Well, I think that dream might come into reality sooner, and I also thought that's a very interesting proposition relative to some of the policy and regulatory things we've been talking about in terms of how we might consider partners and things that could happen across one state border to another. So that kind of creative thinking and innovation is the way that I think we're all going to have to look at the scale area. It just isn't the same old world or the same old way of doing business. Bill, if you're still there, if we're not having fire alarm number 3, and maybe fire alarm number 3 is really all this change. And we've had a couple of questions coming in from folks who are saying, in effect, what happens to the teaching profession in all of this? What happens to faculty? What do we do when we think about careers of the future and mentoring or coaching young people going in this direction? This again is a little bit like some of the earlier discussion we had about no right answers, that we have to balance things, but you've had a career of substance in working with faculty, working with people. What do you think?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I've had that question before. Will this make faculty obsolete? And it throws me why anybody would think that. Now, in our particular curriculum here at the University of Florida, we capture everything new every semester. There are some exceptions to that, but if a faculty member thinks they're obsolete, then they haven't taught in our system, where they actually have to teach as they normally do every semester, several times a year. So there's nothing new about that. There's no loss of jobs. As a matter of fact, what we're finding is that as we go out and try to leverage our current faculty with our facilitator faculty, we're giving the opportunity to practitioners out there, whether they be master's degree in forensics or an MBA or a doctor of pharmacy, to actually, in addition to their daytime job, actually teach. And what we're finding is so many of our professionals love to do it. They love to give back. They'll come in 2 or 3 nights a week and spend some time with our students, and the students love it. The faculty like it because they're able to keep their educational and practice skills up and share those with our students. So there is no loss of faculty. As a matter of fact, the more you put online, the more faculty you need. And I don't suspect that there's any program that can be done that doesn't have to be redone periodically, or it loses its contemporary feel. So I don't see the loss of faculty members in any way, shape, or form as being potential for the future. As a matter of fact, I see an increasing number of faculty needed. But in the case of Rio Salado, I think all of us need to take advantage of those programs that help our faculty learn to teach online. I think that's an extremely important thing to do, and that's an area where we might like to partner with Rio Salado.
That's great, and I think you're talking about change, all of us thinking about change. Carolyn, I'm going to ask you for a comment on that. You and Karen both included in the research you reported looking at different models. Rio Salado's talked about that. And everybody kind of says, well, we're not looking necessarily at the single instructor model anymore or the single individual. And by the same token, I think people are also concerned about adjuncts, contingent faculty, graduate students. I mean, I don't know what we want to call the folks who do a lot of the other work as well. What's your experience in working across so many institutions and courses?
Well, it's an interesting question because, frankly, we haven't seen any full-time faculty or any institutions where they didn't have a list in their back pocket of all the things that they couldn't do. new courses they would like to develop, new majors they'd like to have, changing the kinds of things that they were doing. What that means is they didn't have the resources to make those changes. When you can make some of these large enrollment courses more efficient and more effective, you have some resources to do other things that you've wanted to do. And so our institutions have planned what will happen to the savings, usually within the department that's done the redesign. Not exclusively, but usually. But the thing we say to institutions is, what are you going to do with the resources? What are you going to change at your university to leverage that? Now, the situation with adjuncts is a little bit different because in some places, finding qualified adjuncts is no small issue. And so some of the institutions have said we would prefer to use fewer adjuncts so we didn't need as many. That's an institutional decision. That's not our decision, but that's one of their goals. Other places are in a growth mode, and they're looking for other ways not to need more faculty that they cannot afford, but to have better training. We had a question about training earlier. Better training for a variety of kind of personnel led by faculty, but not having faculty do all the same things that they've always done before. It's actually a fairly complicated question because when you open up what goes on, you obviously say, well, we got the savings, we've got all kinds of growth issues in some fields, but not other fields, in some institutions, but not others. How are we going to handle all these factors?
Great, good. All right. Well, we're coming near to the end of this program. We have a few things to do yet, and we will probably work in another question or so. But I want to go to Don Spicer, who started us off and is the co-chair of the Research Committee. And he's been listening to all of this, watching all of this, and I hope he has a reflective comment or two. And Don, I hope also you'll give us a little preview about what's coming up on the next Research Symposium.
Happy to do so, Jan, and thank you very much, and thank you to all of our colleagues who have done the presentations and the participants who've asked very insightful questions. The next symposium, could you put the slide up, please, is online education and policy. The presentations today have brought forth many questions related to policy. Education per se is full of policies, as we all know. And when you add the ability to cross boundaries, you introduce a wide range of complexities that place-based education doesn't normally get involved with. The questions that came up today, for example, had to do with seat time, which are state laws. The issue that Bill raised about state certification and the complexities of state certification. I liked his allusion to the fact that the police might come and roust his students out in Connecticut, as I recall. It's a serious issue, and more than that, it's a moving target because there have been new interpretations every 6 months on that issue. Copyright is a common issue and fair use in education, but place-based education really has a whole different set of issues, and online education it's a major topic historically. Faculty and institutional ownership of intellectual property. The question of authenticating students it was raised today. The question of international education and the policy issues related to that was raised. If you read the newspapers, you'll see that financial aid and federal investment in supporting online education has become a major political issue. So there are a wide range of issues. They range all the way from individual courses through institution up to the federal level. The is the slide up? Yes. This symposium is going to be on November 13th from 11 to 2 again. We are making trials with an appropriate format to engage a broad audience. And we probably will not use streaming video the next time. But stay tuned and definitely plan on participating if you're interested in online education and policy. Could you put the next slide on, please? The symposium will be organized by having participants who will take the perspective of the institutional perspective, the regional and state perspective, and the federal perspective. And Jan will join us again with her background in ADEC, Crossing Boundaries. We will also have Barbara Zirkin from Stevenson University in Maryland, who has worked on the issues from an institutional perspective and the state certification issues. Bruce Chalot, who was from SREB and is now the executive director of the Sloan Consortium, will participate, and Kay Gilcher, who used to be at UMUC and is now with the Department of Education, will also participate. So put November 13th from 11 to 2 on your calendars. There will be advanced readings published a couple of weeks before. And as with this symposium, there will be opportunities for communicating afterwards. So thank you, Jan.
Thanks very much, Don. I think you sound like you have a great lineup coming up for the next one. And I know everybody has already begun to work the policy questions in. You did a great job of summarizing those things that came out of today's discussion related to that particular element. Frank, I would like to go back to you for some comments. We started out with why this was important in access and cost effectiveness. And you brought the 3 components forward. Don's given us a good rundown, I think, on some of the policy things that got raised. But I'd be interested in your final comments relative to the culture, the technology, the direct learner related, as well as the public perception piece.
Thanks, Jan. First of all, I was pretty impressed with a number of things. The fact that not a lot has been done under the scale umbrella we kind of expected. On the other hand, one is impressed with how much has gone on with different motivations. So pharmacy, you know, the attempt was not to create scale, but the idea was to do what's needed in the pharmacy field, and yet so many of the scale issues got addressed. And I could see that at Rio Salado, an old friend of ours from my Sloan days, and UMUC and others that spoke today. So under different umbrellas, very good work has been going on, and there is enough there that I think a very active research agenda can be mounted. I will think a little bit about the cross-cutting themes that one can begin to think of as research themes. I'm sure others have thought of these things. I'm personally, as people who know me have heard me say many times, I'm a believer in empirical research. I think one in this field in particular learns a lot from what is actually going on, what's being learned. And if we can begin to look across universities, across disciplines, and find the common themes that apply to scale, I think there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot out there. But it's hidden under different names, so we're going to have to look for it. But I think it's a very fertile field for research, and it's one that it is certainly not plowed ground. So it's sitting out there, and we have a lot of work to do. So I'm encouraged.
Thanks very much, Frank, and thank you so much for joining us. I'd want to thank all of the presenters today, certainly to Ed and Bill, who have just spoken very shortly, certainly Don, who's given us that great summary, and especially Karen and Carolyn here in the studio with me, who came all the way to the University of Nebraska so we could work together on this. This has definitely been a team effort. I also want to thank our sponsors. You know, it's great to have sponsors who help us do these kinds of things, and it does take not a lot of money, but a little bit of money helps. And these have been our sponsors for today's program, MediaSite and LoudCloud. And we hope that maybe some more of our sponsors will be interested in research. And then finally, I have a big thank you to say to the University of Nebraska Lincoln Ed Media folks. They've been fabulous in working with us here, in working with trying to do some different things technologically. And I'm very proud of what everybody's achieved today. I think we've set a new standard for how to do some of these things at a higher quality level, and in some ways that over time we'll be able to scale, have high quality, and have scale of the type that we really are looking forward to. With that, I'd like to thank all of you. I hear there's very good discussion going on in the Commons around some of the things that got raised. We'll look forward to our work coming in and chipping in on that. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. This is Janet Poley saying have a great rest of the afternoon.